The clock on my console said 3:27. The caller ID said the name of a woman who had been dead for 11 years. I am the 12th dispatcher to take her call. The other 11 are buried in cemeteries across 3 states. Same wound, same time of night. Same address listed on the death certificate as the place they were found, but not the place they were killed. I have been awake for 31 hours. I have eaten 2 protein bars and half a sandwich somebody left in the break room. The coffee in my hand is cold. My hand is steady. That is not a brag. That is the problem. My hand has been steady through every call I have ever taken on this job, and the people who train you for this work tell you that steadiness is the gift, and they do not tell you that the same gift is what gets you noticed. I work nights. I live alone. The door is supposed to be deadbolted. I checked it before I left for shift, the way I always check it, the way every woman who lives in a city alone has checked a deadbolt at least once in her life. It was locked when I left. It was locked when I came back. It has been locked by my own hand 3 times in the last 6 hours. The doorbell rang. If you're hearing this recording, it means I made a choice. It means I sat down and pressed the record button on a small black device and spoke into it for as long as it took. And it means the line is open at your address now. Let me explain how a dead woman recruits. My name is Ellis. I won't tell you my last name for reasons that will become obvious. I'm 31 years old. I've been a 911 dispatcher in a county I'm not going to name, for a regional center that handles roughly 400 calls a night. The job is not what people think it is. People think dispatchers shout. People think we panic. We don't. We can't. The voice you hear when you call 911 is the calmest voice in the room because the person on the other end of the line is the most frightened person in the room, and they need somewhere to put their fear. So we hold it. For 4 minutes, for 9 minutes, for however long it takes for the units to arrive or for the call to end the way it ends. There are calls that end well. There are calls where the units arrive in time. There are calls where the man with the knife loses interest, where the child finds the inhaler, where the husband starts breathing again on the kitchen floor while the operator on the line counts compressions out loud. Those calls go in a folder in your head you do not open. You do not get to celebrate. You move to the next light on the board. There are calls that end the other way. Those go in a different folder. You do not open that one either, but the folder opens itself sometimes, in the shower, on the drive home, in the half second before sleep. I trained for 16 weeks. I passed every certification on the first try. I scored in the top 2% on the audio stress evaluation, which is a test where they put you in a booth and play recordings of real calls. Children screaming, men begging, women bleeding out in the seconds before the ambulance reaches them, and they measure your heart rate. Mine barely moved. The instructor wrote on my evaluation, in pen, the word unusual, and underlined it twice. He smiled at me when he handed it back. I thought he meant it as a compliment. I do not have family in the area. I have a sister in another time zone. We text on holidays. My parents are alive, in the same house I grew up in, 4 states away. I see them once a year. I do not have a partner. I had one briefly in my 20s before I took this job. He told me in our last argument that there was something in me that did not flinch, and he said it like it was a verdict. I took the job 2 months later. I am very good at this job. That is, apparently, why I was chosen. 3 weeks into my second year, I took a call at 3:27 in the morning from a woman who said her name was Ellis Mara. I thought she was repeating mine. She wasn't. The first thing I noticed was that the address didn't load. That doesn't happen often. Even on burner phones, even on landlines patched through old switchboards, we get something. A tower triangulation, a coordinate, a city name. Her line gave me nothing. Just the name and a number that came back to a residential block on the east side of the county. The second thing I noticed was the breathing. She breathed for 9 seconds before she spoke. I timed it later, off the recording. 9 seconds is a long time on a 911 line, long enough that I asked her twice if she could hear me. When she answered, her voice was not the voice of someone in crisis. I asked her for the address. She gave it to me, slowly, each digit and each letter spaced out like she was reading it off a card she'd written for herself. I dispatched a unit, standard procedure. I told her units were on the way. I told her to stay on the line. I asked her to describe the man in the hallway. She didn't answer that question. She answered a different one. She told me in the same flat voice that the carpet was already soaking when they arrived. Past tense. Future memory. The kind of sentence you say when you have already lived through the thing you are describing and you are reading the report back to the person who is going to write it. I told her to stay with me. The call was logged. The recording was archived. The whole thing should have been routine, except for one detail. I asked her to repeat that. She did. Word for word. Same intonation, same pause in the same place, like she was reading from a script she had read aloud many, many times. The unit arrived at the address 11 minutes later. There was a house at the location. There was no Ellis Mara inside it. The current resident, a retired man named Henry, had lived there alone for the better part of a decade. He had not called 911. He had not heard a phone ring. The officers checked the bathroom anyway. They checked the hallway. They checked the carpet. The officer on the body cam, I read the report 2 days later, described the carpet as recently shampooed. Slightly damp. Henry had said his cleaner came in on Tuesdays. The call had been routed at 03:27 on a Wednesday. I went home that morning and slept badly. I didn't tell anyone about the call. I told myself it was a prank, a relay glitch, something that would resolve itself when somebody on day shift pulled the recording and laughed at me. I told myself the words past tense was a misremembering on my part, that she had said the carpet will be soaking, future tense, the way a person describing an emergency in progress would describe it. I told myself a lot of things. I'm a person who can do that. Nobody pulled the recording, or more accurately, somebody pulled it, and that somebody was not on day shift, and that somebody did not laugh. 3 days later, my supervisor pulled me into a back office and closed the door. His name was Dean. He'd been a senior dispatcher for 19 years. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly since some specific Tuesday in 2017. He didn't ask me how I was doing. He didn't ease into it. He turned the folder around so I could read the first page, and he said, "She called you at 3:27, didn't she?" I said yes. He said, "Did she give you the address?" I said yes. He said, "Don't go to it. Don't drive past it. Don't search it on a map at home." The first call in the log was placed in 2015. The dispatcher's name was Maria Holloway. She had 31 years on the job. She picked up Ellis Mara's call at 3:27 on a Tuesday in October. 6 days later, she was found dead in her own kitchen. Single laceration across the carotid. No forced entry, no witnesses, no suspect. The second call was 2016, a dispatcher named Travis Boone. 6 days, same wound. The third was 2017, a dispatcher named Anna Reyes. 5 days, same wound. The fourth was 2018, the fifth, 2019. The sixth, 2020, that one made the news for about 48 hours before the coverage went quiet. Pandemic timing, easy to bury. The seventh, 2021, the eighth, 2022, the ninth, 2023, the 10th, 2024. Each name a person I could have known if I had transferred in earlier. Each face a person who had sat in the chair I sat in. Each one had taken the same call at the same time on a different night, and each one had gone home, and each one had locked their door, and each one had been found. 11 calls, 11 dispatchers, 11 funerals. Each of them had taken Ellis Mara's call at 3:27 a.m. Each of them had died in their own home between 5 and 7 days later, with the same wound she had described to them on the line. I asked him why he was telling me then. He said, "Because you're already on the list. Talking about it doesn't change that. It just means you go in with your eyes open." I asked him what the others had learned. He told me each one of them had figured out a piece of it before they died. Maria Holloway had identified the address as the site of an unsolved 2015 homicide. A woman murdered at 3:27 a.m., bled out before units arrived, 4-minute response time on a call she had placed herself. Travis Boone had pulled the original call recording from the 2015 archive and confirmed the voice matched. Anna Reyes had cross-referenced the dates and found the pattern, every 12 months, almost to the day, since the murder. The 11th dispatcher, Arellano, had figured out the part nobody wanted to figure out. He had recorded his own call, he had played it back, And the call he had received from Ellis Mara, the one logged in our system at 3:27 a.m., was, byte for byte, the same audio file as the original 2015 distress call she had placed in the moments before her death. The same recording. Coming in live, 11 years apart. She wasn't calling, she was being replayed, and something was using the replay as a door. Dean said this without inflection. He said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed in his own head for years and has been waiting for somebody else to give him permission to say out loud. He had not picked up Ellis Mara's call. He had been on a different line at 3:27 on the night Maria Holloway picked up in 2015. He had been on a different line every year since. He had made it a quiet personal policy. He had not told the floor. He had told one other person, once, in 2019, a dispatcher named Karen, who had thanked him and who had picked up Ellis Mara's call 8 months later anyway, because the line lights up when it lights up, and the rotation does not ask whose turn it is. Karen had been the ninth. Dean told me he was sorry. He told me he should have done more. He told me the only reason he was telling me now was that he had decided, after Arellano, that the silence was worse than the rule. He told me he understood if I wanted to quit on the spot. He told me there was paperwork in his desk drawer for exactly that scenario. I asked him if any of the 11 had quit. He said 3 of them had. He said it had not made a difference. Dean gave me 3 days off. He told me to use them to think. He told me to call him if I changed my mind about anything. He didn't say what anything was. I didn't take 3 days off. I went to the records room. The original case file on Ellis Mara was thinner than I expected. Her own 911 call, the unit dispatch log, a coroner's preliminary, a scene photograph I'm not going to describe, a neighbor's statement, a note from the responding officer that read in handwriting the carpet was already soaking when we arrived. That detail was redacted from the public report. There was no suspect, no weapon recovered, no motive. The case had been moved from active to cold within 6 months. The detective assigned to it had retired in 2018 and died of unrelated causes in 2021. I had to look up what unrelated causes meant on his death certificate. It said cardiac arrest. It said in his sleep. It said 3:27 a.m. I put the certificate back in the folder. I did not put it in the same order I found it. The internal record, the one Dean had shown me, the one marked classified, was different. It had been started in 2017 after the second dispatcher death by a deputy chief who had noticed the pattern. He had written a memo. The memo had been buried. He had been transferred. The internal record had continued to be updated quietly by a small handful of people inside the department who knew but who had decided not to know publicly. The recommendation in the memo had not been adopted. The reason given, on a follow-up sheet stapled to the back, was operational. You can't tell a 911 floor not to answer a call. You can't build a system that decides which deaths are worth preventing. So they had let it continue. 11 years, 11 dispatchers. The math on the back of an envelope was simple. 1 a year was a survivable rate of attrition for a regional center. I sat in the records room until my hands stopped shaking enough to put the file back. I left the room. I went home. I locked my door. I checked the deadbolt 3 times. That night, my work phone, the one issued by the county, the one that only rings when I'm on shift, rang on my kitchen counter at 3:27 a.m. I didn't answer. It rang 12 times. Then it stopped. When I picked it up in the morning, the call log showed nothing. No incoming call, no missed call, no record at all. But the battery, which had been at 84% the night before, was at 0. I plugged it in. The charger took. The phone came back to life in about 40 seconds. The screen, when it lit up, opened directly to the dialer. The dialer had a number partially typed into it. 3 digits. 9, 1, 1. I had not typed those digits. The phone had been face down on the counter all night, untouched, while I had been asleep in a room 3 meters away with the door closed. I cleared the dialer. I locked the screen. I put the phone in the freezer on top of a frozen package of peas, and I closed the freezer door, and I went and stood under the shower for 30 minutes, and that is the last decision I remember making clearly for the next 4 days. I went back to work the next shift. I didn't tell anyone what had happened with the phone. I didn't tell Dean. I told myself the battery had been faulty. I told myself the records room had been a long day. I worked 5 more nights without incident. Nothing at 327, nothing on the line, nothing in the apartment. I started taking the long way home. I started parking on the opposite side of my building. I started leaving a lamp on a timer. I started double-checking the deadbolt by pulling on the handle 3 times, then 4, then 5. The way you check a thing when you do not actually trust the check. I told nobody. I went to work. I answered the calls in my queue. I was, on paper, the same dispatcher I had been the week before. On the inside, I was a person who had begun listening to her own breathing whenever the room was quiet, to make sure it was hers. On the 6th night, the car was still in the lot. I had noticed it the night before. I had assumed it belonged to someone on a smoke break. It hadn't moved. Same position, same idle. The exhaust visible in the cold air. I asked the security desk if anyone was running the engine. They said no. They said the lot was empty except for shift vehicles. I looked again. The car was gone. I shouldn't have my personal phone on the floor. Policy. I keep it in my locker. That night I had it in my hand. I do not remember taking it out of the locker. The screen said the time was 3:27 a.m. I let it ring. I watched it ring. 11 times. 12. On the 13th ring, the call connected, without me touching it. She said, "Ellis, he's at your door now." I was not at my door. I was at my console, 11 miles from my apartment, in a building with security badges and key cards and 3 sets of locked doors between me and the parking lot. She said it again, slower. "Ellis, he's at your door now." I stood up. The other dispatchers turned. The supervisor, not Dean, a younger one, asked if I was okay. I pointed at the security monitor. The hallway on it was the call center hallway. The door on it was the call center door. The monitor had been showing that feed all night. I had not been holding it. I told the supervisor I needed to step out. I went to the bathroom. I locked the stall. I sat on the floor and breathed for 10 minutes. When I came back to my desk, my console had a new alert. A 911 call had been placed from my apartment building at 3:27 a.m. The caller had given her name as Ellis Mara. She had said her front door had just been opened from the outside. She had bled out before the units arrived. The dispatcher who had taken the call, according to the system log, was me. Time stamped to the same minute the phone on my desk had rung. The same minute I had been sitting in a bathroom stall with my hands over my face. The system was certain. The system has no doubt. The system says what the system says, and the system in that moment said that I had taken a call I had not taken, and answered an emergency I had not answered, and logged a death that had not yet been reported. The supervisor who came to my console was not Dean. It was the younger one. He looked at the alert on my screen. He looked at me. He asked me gently if I was feeling well. He said the system sometimes glitched at end of shift. He said he would put in a ticket. I said yes. I said thank you. I clocked out 20 minutes early. Dean was not in the building that night. Dean had not been in the building, I learned the next day, for 36 hours. Dean had used a personal day. Dean had used a second personal day. Dean was not answering his phone. I did not need anyone to tell me what that meant. I drove home that morning the way you drive when you are trying to be the person you were yesterday. I took surface streets. I stopped at every yellow light. I did not look in the rearview mirror because I was afraid that if I did, I would either see something or see nothing, and I could not decide which one would be worse. The sun was up by the time I parked. People were out walking dogs. A woman across the street was watering the planter on her porch. A normal morning. Birds, a garbage truck working its way down the block. The world doing what the world does when nobody has died yet that it knows about. I climbed the stairs. I stopped on the 3rd floor landing. The hallway was the hallway. My door was my door. The deadbolt was, when I tested it, still locked. On the threshold, just inside the door, sitting on the carpet where it had not been when I left, was a small black audio recorder. It was the kind we use in the records room, the kind we use to digitize old call tapes for the archive. There was a label on its side, in faded marker, 2015, Mara E. Orig. I picked it up. The battery indicator was full. The play button glowed soft green. the way it does when a tape is cued. I pressed play. It was the original 911 call from 2015. Ellis Mara's voice, the same voice that had spoken to me on my shift, the same voice that had spoken to 11 dispatchers before me, describing a man in her hallway. The bathroom door not holding. The wound she could not yet see but already knew was coming. It played for 4 minutes, the exact length of her bleed-out. The recording ended in a way 911 calls are not supposed to end. Not with a click, not with sirens arriving, but with a long, slow exhale, and then the soft, deliberate sound of someone setting a receiver gently down. It was not mine. I had not been cut. I checked. I checked my hands. I checked my throat. I checked the soles of my feet, the way you check when you have walked through a kitchen barefoot and you suspect glass. There was nothing on me. The blood on the deadbolt was someone else's, and it was on the inside face of the lock, on the part of the brass cylinder that only touches the inside of the door. Somebody had bled briefly on the inside of my apartment. On the lock of a door I had left deadbolted from the outside. I sat down on the floor of my own apartment. I held the recorder. I thought about the 11 names on the call log. I thought about Maria Holloway, 31 years on the job, found in her kitchen 6 days after her call. I thought about Arellano, the 11th, who had figured out that Ellis Mara was being replayed. I thought about what Dean had said. The only way to break the line is to not answer. And we'd already lost everyone who knew. The thing is, I had not answered. I had let it ring 12 times. 13. The call had connected on its own, which meant the rule was not the rule, which meant whatever had been using Ellis Mara as a door had stopped needing the door to be opened from this side. I did not get up. I sat on the floor. I held the recorder. I rewound it. I pressed play again. This time the recording was different. This time the woman on the tape gave the address as my address. The street, the number, the apartment. She described a man in her hallway, the bathroom door not holding. She bled out for 4 minutes. The dispatcher's voice on the recording, asking her for her location, asking her to stay on the line, telling her units were on the way, telling her to keep talking, telling her to keep breathing. That dispatcher's voice was mine. 11 dispatchers came before me. Each one figured out a piece of it before they died. Maria figured out the address. Travis figured out the voice. Anna figured out the pattern. Arellano figured out the replay. I figured out the last piece. She was never warning us. She was making more of us. Every dispatcher who picked up her call became part of the recording. Every recording became the next call. The line is not a haunting. The line is a recruitment system. 11 years, 11 voices. 12, with mine, now layered into the audio, calm and professional, asking her for her location, telling her to stay with me. The wound is not punishment. The wound is the price of admission. The address on the death certificate is the address where the body was found. The address where the dispatcher actually died, where the part of her that does the calm, professional voice on the line went somewhere else, is a house in 2015 with a soaking carpet, and a hallway, and a door that did not hold. We do not get to be buried in our own homes. We get to be moved into hers. That is what Maria Holloway found out. That is what Travis Boone found out. That is what Arellano found out in the moment before whatever happens at the end happens. 11 of us are on that recording now. The next dispatcher will hear 12 of us. The next dispatcher who picks up her call will hear my voice asking the questions. She wasn't introducing me to him, she was introducing me to the next one of us. If you're hearing this, the recording on your threshold is mine. Don't pick it up. Don't press play. Don't answer the call that comes after. And if your shift starts at 3:27, don't be good at the job. That's the part they choose for. If this is your first time on Dread Frequency, this channel tells the stories the official record won't. New ones every week, in the hour when most people stop being awake. If you want the shortcut of this one, the 60-second version, it's pinned in the description. There's a teaser before it, and a teaser before that. The arc starts 3 days before the night the line rang at her door. Subscribe, turn notifications on, and if your phone rings tonight at 3:27 from a number that doesn't load, let it ring.